All right, I'm Steve Wood, recovered alcoholic. Welcome to the Great Rally Book Study. Um, I'm excited about tonight. It is, you know, I want to actually open with a poem that I read years ago by a guy named Robert Fulghum. It's a beautiful poem called Water, and it really settles the aspect of God really well. And it says, water is everywhere in all living things. We cannot be separated from water, no life. Water comes in many forms: liquid, vapor, ice, snow, fog, rain, hail. But no matter the form, it's still water. Human beings give this stuff many names in many languages in all forms. It's crazy to argue what is its true name. Call it what you will, it makes no difference to the water. It is what it is. Human beings drink it from containers, cups, glasses, jugs, skins, their own hands, whatever, maybe the garden hose. To argue about what container is proper for the water is crazy. The container doesn't change the water. Some like it hot, some like it cold, some like it ice, fizzy, stuff mixed in it. No matter, it does not change the nature of the water. Never mind the name of the cup or the mix. These are not important. What we have all in common is thirst for the water of life. As it is with water, so it is with God. And I always loved that. A friend of mine gave that to me years ago. Absolutely love it. Made Robert Fulgram's name is. So last week we talked about, well, we started our journey into this spiritual realm, so to speak. And we discussed, the we got into the spiritual experience and spiritual ways, the differences, and the experience is sudden and profound, and this overwhelming God consciousness, and the awakening is this educational already, where the relationship with God develops slowly over a period of time, which they both lead to the same thing: personality change sufficient to bring about recovery. And tonight we're going to start with agnostics. And last week we talked about the difference, you know, between the agnostic, the atheist, the theist, and the Gnostic. And just to reiterate that, because that's the title of the chapter, the agnostic, they don't deny God exists. They just want proof. They're just not unsure skeptic. And the atheist just simply rejects the idea of God. And the theist, that's the believer, they simply believe God is real. But that's as far as they ever get. All three have a mental conviction without proof. Um, the Gnostic goes beyond believing and gains a spiritual understanding of knowing God. As a result of spiritual conversion, they know God because they have experienced God. Remember, I'm going to reiterate again: anything in life you know from experience. Everything else is a theory. So we're on page 44. So just to mention this chapter was a major game changer for me. Huge. I am blessed that I had a sponsor that was extremely thorough and in depth on specific things in this chapter, and he could explain almost everything. But I can honestly tell you, I wouldn't be here today if I hadn't taken to a different way. It helped me get past some very tall analytical mountains, so to speak, that I carried my whole life, and I needed a new idea of God. I needed something brand new, something that looked different. I had mentioned this before. In recovery, there's a saying: there's a wrench for every nut. And I was a tough nut to crack. And this chapter was that nut, that wrench for me, not the nut. I'm the nut. So, but page 44. In the preceding chapters, we learned something of alcoholism. We hope you made clear distinctions between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. We've done that. If when you honestly want to and find you cannot quit entirely. So what they're talking about there, you can't quit entirely. Even when you quit, you can't quit. They're talking about the obsession, reoccurring persistent idea of drinking and doesn't respond to reason, right? Or if when drinking you have little control of the amount you take, they're talking about the allergy now, that the physical reaction alcohol, craving for more once I start, craving for more. Says in this case, you may be suffering from illness. Only a spiritual experience will conquer. Now they got my attention, right? Because to conquer means to gain control over something, to defeat something. So it tells me right there that we can defeat this illness through a spiritual experience. And I remember being at a meeting one time, and I was explain. I was it was like a workshop, and had to explain the spiritual solution. And I think the only people that knew anything about the book were the people talking. There was a bunch of us there. Everybody else was, I mean, that were leading the group. Everybody else was just meeting makers. And one old guy stood up in 40 years or something, and he says that there is no he goes, it's impossible to have a victory over alcohol. It's the chase that matters. And I'm sitting there going, I don't want that. And I kind of looked at my friend and winked at him, and because we been around for a while, but it completely debunks that. Anyone says you can't have victory over alcohol, this tells me that. It tells me that we're suffering from almost only a spiritual experience will conquer. If something's conquered, that means I've defeated it, right? It's been defeated. So when taking it through the steps, I turn this paragraph, almost this paragraph, into questions. So even though I've taken a person through step one and I get to we agnostics, I read this paragraph and ask them questions. I just ask them, and eventually I'm gonna go, it's like a predecessor almost to the ABCs. But I turn them into questions. I look at them just to make sure when you honestly want to, you find you can't quit entirely. Question mark. And I ask them, when drinking, you have a little control might take, question mark. And when they answer that question, now I bring it to the spiritual. Do you believe your suffering is only a spiritual experience will conquer? I don't expect a right answer there or a wrong answer there yet. Or if there is one. Back to the book. To one who feels he's atheist or agnostic, such a experience seems impossible. Of course, because they're outside the box, right? But to continue as he means disaster, especially as alcoholic, the hope is bright. So if one's the atheist rejects God, one's the skeptic, they're both sitting on no connection to God whatsoever. But to continue means disaster. So that much stop him, right? If especially as alcoholic, the hope is bright, that means allergy obsession. But look at this: to be doomed to an alcoholic death or live on a spiritual basis are not easy alternatives to face. And people ask me all the time, what does spiritual mean? Usually, like, especially greener than green people, I get the sponsor. They don't even, I've never even heard allergy obsession before and stuff like that. Green, super green people. And I get my personal definition of spiritually. I ask them what spiritual means. My definition of spiritual after many years is simple: the comprehension of doing the right thing through a personal knowledge and understanding of God's will. It's just doing the right thing. It's simple like that. And that becomes even more clear through deeper and deeper expansion into the God consciousness. And then when you know God, you always know what's right. You always do, especially when you start, when you're, doing, especially when you've always been doing the wrong thing, you know. I mean, you think about it, we've always had this sense of what is right. When I'll give an example. Like when I was out there, I committed crimes. I burglarized houses and all sorts of bad stuff. And I knew in my gut what I was doing was wrong, but it didn't stop me. But it was there. When I did 4 through 9 and moved all this stuff out of the way, from resentments to the misdirected instincts, I gained a deep clarity of what was right. We call it sixth sense. That's what it means in step 11, which says what used to be a hunch or occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind. So that's the thing, knowing what the right thing is, where we are. That's, so, the steps, that's what the steps do. It shows us we have a comprehension, and we go more deeper in step 11. Let's see what else it says. To be doomed to an alcoholic death or live on a spiritual basis are not easy terms to face. So Bill mentions death a lot. And I believe from the bottom of my heart, he does not mean us being dead. For us to drink is to die. Alcoholic death is simply the staying in the cycle of drinking they mentioned doxepane, the cycle of the allergy obsession, going on that run over and over and over again, become nothingness and empty in life. But it says we have two options: alcoholic death or live on a spiritual basis. Now, sound reasoning says, I don't want to die right away. And you're like, I don't want to die. So what was the other thing? Spiritual? Oh, it's, die or be spiritual. Well, be spiritual. I want a better life. Now, through my years of sponsorship, I've witnessed, and being around AA for many years, especially being a counselor for a long time, I witnessed newcomers sit around and do nothing, driven by fear, driven by pride, driven by resentments, self-esteem, high self-esteem and low self-esteem. And that frame of mind, they fear doing the steps, um, abandoning themselves to a new way of life. It's unfamiliar with them. And they conclude, based on theory, because they never experienced them, the steps are too exhausting. And they also, of course, they question them because the steps are what? We're only giving them a promise they work. And they go back to what they know, back to Groundhog Day of the cycle of drinking. Rather than having a new life of new discoveries every day, they chose that. Ignorance is bliss. But notice it does not say to be to be on a spiritual basis or to be spiritual. It says to live on a spiritual basis. Now it changes everything. Being spiritual and living spiritual are two totally different things. Many in recovery believe it's all about being spiritual. So instead of doing the steps, what happens is they attempt to act spiritual. So they cover up resentment, fear, and guilt and act happy. They act like they have freedom and peace. They, fake it till they make it in their hopes. And they live in this delusion that, that a sick mind can be spiritual, can act spiritual. Not knowing, I said before, a sick mind can't overcome a sick mind, or self-will can overstep the will. So spiritual, living spiritual is, they think living spiritual is hard work, and, but that's why we have the steps. But they don't see that. Let's see what else it says. But it isn't so difficult, thank God. About half our original fellowships were exactly of that type. At first, some of us used to avoid this issue, hoping against hope when we're not true alcoholics. But after a while, we had to face the fact that we must find a spiritual basis of our life, or else. Or else what? Like I said a minute ago, stay living on five senses, stuck in a three-dimensional world, insane mind, trying to figure out life, trying to act what we believe is spiritual. They find themselves, you know, the sober life is hard, they say, and they get overwhelmed and they pull it out of the drink. That's what people do every day. Every moment. Right now, this is happening. It says, perhaps it is going to be that way with you. Hopefully not. But cheer up. Some of us, like half of us, thought we were atheists or agnostics. Our experience shows we should not be disconcerted. We shouldn't be disturbed with that, concerned. If a mere code of morals or better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. So, the code of morals is just a set of standards. It could be laws, could be rules, that good people do, right? I mean, I tried morals, the morals of other people. I tried the morals that my parents taught me. I tried what my friends, taught, the teachers taught. I tried desperately what religion taught. Then I tried what AA meetings taught. What rehab taught me over and over again, even what jail taught me. the self-help books that I read, when I was trying to be sober, that I had what the therapist taught, or even like acting spiritual. And the question, I say all those because what codes and morals did you try? Because you want to, what happens is we try all those things and they don't work, and we go and try them again, thinking that somehow they're going to work this time. I mean, I was raised in the church, and my parents pushed morals on me that I could not live up to. I mean, what's your experience in that? You know, can you live up to the morals? I mean, I'm a huge mark for Alan Watts. I love Alan Watts, and he's one of the greatest philosophical, philosophers of all time. Amazing books. I quote him in here. I talk about some of his stuff. One of the greatest spiritual minds ever. And he died a drunk. He couldn't live up to his own teachings. He went through a dark time and never got out of it. That just shows you something. And you tell it to Alan Watts fans, they're like, whoa, I didn't know that. Back to the book. But we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us on how much we tried. We could wish to be moral. We could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all our might, but the needed power wasn't there. When I read this, I thought about, I prayed for that stuff, you know, and, I prayed to be moral. I prayed to be, because I was told to pray for whatever you wanted. I prayed to be philosophically comforted. I prayed for for those things with all my might. The needed power wasn't there because I didn't seek it. Well, again, what's your experience? Look at this. This is a big one here. Our human resources as marshaled by the will were not sufficient to fill it. Marshal means arranged or guided, right? Controlled. So our human resources arranged, guided, controlled by our thinking, our human aid, human resources. I mean, this book, I mean, I don't know how many times, I forgot I counted before, say 10 times or more, talks about human aid fails us. Yet right up the street, there's people hurrying up to get, off the freeway to run to that next meeting because they need one. And they're scared they're gonna, and they're still gonna drink, they're gonna go to another one, you know, and they're going there defeated by their own human power already. And how many, you know, how much human power does a hopeless alcoholic have? Zero. What's 100 times zero? Zero. So what power is there as a group of 100 people? This is, the answer I'm going to say. It's not self-help program. It's not group therapy. It's not a we program. It's a spiritual program. That's the beauty of this. 45. Lack of power. That was our dilemma. So lack means zero. And for a long time, I thought, it meant something I didn't have enough of. But so when I say lack means zero, it would be like if I owe Ali $150 and I give him 70, I go 75. I lack the $150 I owe him. I don't have it. There's zero, there's nothing. So lack means nothing, zero, zero, you know. But my problem was I thought it was something I had to have. I thought it was something I didn't have enough of. So I thought for years in recovery, and I heard this in rehabs and stuff. And so I mean, how many friends do you have? They'd ask me in rehab, you know, you have, get the right job. So I thought it was lack of friends, lack of money, lack of women, lack of sex, lack of the right car or something, the right house, the right job, maybe even the right drugs, alcohol. So what I lacked and what happened? I pursued it. And where is that? Outside myself. And where does an insane mind seek solutions? Outside themselves. This is an inner journey, not an outer journey. It's an inner journey, right? Inner journey. So lack of power was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live. It had to be a power greater than ourselves. Obviously, but where and how do we find this power? So now we're getting into location and method, where and how. So to see how we find this power, we're going to go to page 25. And we've gone before, so I'm going to go over a simple approach on it. All right, page 25. And let's just see how we find the power. There's almost none of us like the self-searching, right? That sounds like step 4. Just, it said self-inventory, the deep examination of our thoughts, ideas, and actions. We're trying to uncover what drives those thoughts and actions. That's going to lead to self-awareness, self-searching, soul surgery, like they call it in the Oxford group, or self-analysis. The leveling of pride. That's not leveling like a leveler. That's demolishing, like level a building. 4 through 9. That sounds like 4 through 9. I mean, I used to always say step 9, the leveling of pride, but it's all 4. It's all 4 through 9. It's all of them. The confession of our shortcomings, 5. Sounds like step 5, which the process requires for successful consummation. I was playing this before when I was here. Consummation is to complete a intended goal. And when I do the 3rd step, my goal is to get to the point of what my will and life's over to God. So what is the goal of 4 and 5? What is the goal? To let God remove these defects of character. Sure, 6 and 7. And the other goal is to repair relationships in the past. 8 and 9. So what is the method we use? 4, 5, 6, 7, 9. 4, 5, 6, 9. I mean, that's the how. I mean, I said it a minute ago, and I don't want to sound like a broken record. I mean, what methods have you tried? I mean, I tried Christianity, I tried yoga, I tried meditation, I tried therapy, doctors, ministers, churches, ashrams, meetings, all great, even book studies. All were great, but none of them delivered because I didn't take any action. It just trimmed away a few branches, right? I used to have a tree in front of my house, and every year I just trim the branches away in the hopes that somehow it wouldn't look dead. It doesn't work that way. But thanks to 429, I was able not only to get rid of the root of the problem, but remove the root altogether. That's how we find the power. So now let's talk about the location. And I'm going to spend a month in We Agnostics, and I hate waiting to get to page 55, but that's where we're going right now, the location. So we're going to page 55, where we find the power. So this page changed everything for me, changed my life. I grew up in an very old school Catholic home, generations and generations of Catholics. Everything was built on Catholicism. I thought it was, so people would ask me, so what nationality are you? I'd say Catholic. I thought that's what they meant, because that's what we did. I went to Catholic school, church on Sunday, nothing wrong with that stuff. I was altar boy, never missed a holy day of obligation, did confirmation, first communion. And I remember when I did confirmation, that's when you're 15 and you get confirmed, supposed to unite you with the Holy Spirit from baptism to communion with God and Holy Spirit. And I was like, I hope this will make me a different person. And my friends like, well, don't hope. Don't you know it will? And I remember all the kids in my group were crying outside when it happened, when I did it. And I was sitting there, oh, hey, was it good for you? I'm like, oh, it was great. I didn't know. And my mother and grandmother and my aunties all told me if I didn't pray, I would go to hell. They also warned me that God was watching me everywhere. And if I did bad things, I would be punished by God. So I had this elementary view of God sitting up in up in the high clouds on the big throne, the long white beard, the Zeus-looking God, looking Santa Claus God, I like to call it, looking down on the world and passing judgment, but looking at me the most. And I remember asking my father and saying, Dad, I think I was my son's age, so probably 10. Where I'm like, Dad, I know that you're the tooth fairy. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know that the Easter Bunny, I know about Santa Claus. If I have this, all those things aren't real. So what about God? And he just grabbed me by my hand and squeezed my hand and says, don't ever talk about the question God here. That's the way it was. Um, as I grew older, I became frustrated, confused with the whole aspects of God. I call myself an atheist, but I wasn't. Um, but God was not just punishing anymore. He was angry, he was unloving, he was judgmental, mean, you know, didn't listen. And these conceptions led me to questioning God. Here's the scariest part of all that. All the things I read to you, none of those conceptions changed when I was 31, by the time I was 31 years old. That's what my belief system was when I walked in here. That was God. Child conception of God. And part of the things that I couldn't grasp, and this is not a knock on religion at all. I mean, I'm still a religious person, is um as a kid, and then into my adulthood, they said, this fascinating with the all-loving God who could heal. But what confused me, yet he would withhold the healing for some and offer it to others. That's just what I thought. And who threatens, this world's who burn to hell, this doesn't follow the rules. But a lot of people told me. All that confused me. And what I know today is this child conception of God, of a punishing God, only breed more fear rather than the love we experience from all loving God. And I just thank Bill Wilson for this page right here, because it changed everything for me. Yet we've been seeing a different kind of flight, a spiritual liberation. That means freedom from this world, people who rose above their problems. They said God made things possible and we only smiled. Later in the book, when we become spiritually awoke, he says we can laugh at those things, spirituality weakness. So at first, we laugh at those say God made these things possible, and later on, when we're awake, we laugh at those things who think we switch roles. But the thing is it says we had seen spiritual release, but like it tells us it wasn't true. You know, and that was all because of my doubts. Actually, we're fooling ourselves. So deep down, every man, woman, child is a fundamental, foundation or principle of idea of God. You could have you could put 700,000 people into a stadium and not one person has never heard of God. You can have a trillion people and then not rarely person never heard of God. Any type of idea. But look at fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured by calamity. Calamity is chaos and drama. Or you can add more to it. By pomp, it's pride. It's, what do those people think of me? Fear. By worship of other things, we can go on that list too, what we worshipped. But in some for another was there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in him life are fact as old as man himself. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup, just as much as feelings we have for a friend. And when my sponsor took me through this, I was argumentative but trying to be nice, and I really wanted it. And I said, I really want to understand this God. And he goes, well, I'm going to ask you a question. He goes, what do you look for in a friend? A real friend, you know? And I've, had lots of fair weather friends. I said, well, unconditional love, loyalty, honest, unselfish respect, certain words like that. Always there, calm, open-minded, someone who listens. And he looks at me and he goes, you're never going to find that friend that has all those things, but God does. And I kind of looked at him like, that's interesting. Here's the condition of finding God. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly. So now I'm told I seek, this is a seeking thing, but he was there. He was much as fact as we were. We found the great reality deep down within us. And the last analysis is looking everywhere else. It is only there where he may be found. It is so with us. What is the great reality? Well, it's capitalized. Talking about God. And where is this power? Where do we find the power? Deep down within us. The great reality. That's why I call this book, I'm calling it a name. What amazes me is Bill just explained God in one sentence. And during my lifetime, it seemed like it took someone hours to explain God. The guys that knock on your door and stuff, you know, I was looking in the wrong place. The second that was explained to me and I read it, that child conception of God was shattered. It was like a window falling out of the frame and breaking all over the place. It's not putting back together again. It was gone. I guess what I'm saying is I had hope, and probably the first time in my life. And he asked me if I was willing to believe in a power greater than myself. I said something I thought I would never say. Yes. The first time in many years I had hope. But the truth was I had really had a choice. But many years of trying all these other ways, I finally accepted I had a spiritual problem. Thus began this greatest journey of my life. And that's seeking the spiritual solution. I believe wholeheartedly that perhaps, then perhaps I will find this great reality. And I started to understand what the steps were seeking. My old ideas of resentments and prejudices, needed to be replaced. I knew that. But being willing to believe in God could restore me to sanity. And it catapulted me into a decision. And I took action. Step 3 is just a formality then. And I was scared of step 3 more than 2 for years. The first AA meeting I ever went to, I looked on the wall and I saw the word God and I wanted to leave. There's a great analogy that I've used many times in here, and it's just sums it up how many of us were. And so it's like one night I'm in my house and the power goes out, blackout, right? And I go to leave and I drop my keys in the house. So I'm stuck around the house looking for the keys for a while. And then I notice outside there's one street light on. So I go, oh, I'm gonna go look over into the street light for my keys. My neighbor comes over and goes, hey, what are you looking for? My keys. He's down on the ground. Every few months, another neighbor shows up. He's looking down on the ground. And when I asked me, he goes, where did you drop your keys? I said, in the house. He goes, you mean to tell me that you dropped your keys in the house and we're looking over here? I said, well, it didn't make any sense to look around in the dark when there's light over here. And that's exactly what I used to do, looking in the wrong place. I have a problem inside of me. I'm looking outside for solutions myself. That's exactly what I used to do. And the truth is rather than God being somewhere out here, we learn through this process that we're just a portion of God. And that's the thing, is within every creature is this spirit that's largely been left unexamined. Therefore, we become accustomed to taking it for granted. And because our main focus is our physical world, what's out here, what I must have, is my instincts for me to do, leaving me restricted and limited. Through this spiritual journey, instead of waiting for, our instincts to always be fulfilled, to feel good, instead we look inside and obtain the healing elements we need. And it might be simply letting stuff go and letting stuff go, making amends, all this stuff. Begin to understand the greatness of your higher self. So it's like the big question is, how do we go beyond belief and experience God? How do we know God? Steps. That's what the steps do. The spirit becomes the primary focus of your life. That's why the steps are an inner journey again, not an outer journey. I'm going to read a poem by Rumi, one of the greatest poets of all time. And my grand sponsor had given this to me. And surprised me because he was a pretty religious man. He said, I examined the whole Christian cross. He was not there. I entered the temple of the Hindus and the ancient Pagas, but I could not find a trace of him anywhere. I searched the mountains of the valleys of Kaja. He was nowhere to be seen. He was neither in the heights nor in the depths. My search was in vain. Then I was directed to the pursuit in Kaaba in Mecca. He was not there either. I questioned the greatest scholars and philosophers. He was beyond their understanding. Finally, I looked into my own heart. It was there where I saw him. He was nowhere else to be found. Gets me choked up reading that. But, people always say in AA, I just need to get closer to God. You hear that talk at meetings, even in church. How can you get closer to God than within you? It's closer to your own breath. Here and now, Bill says it's only there where he may be found. Only is a powerful word. And it was so with us, found, critical, very critical, meaning I must look within to find this power. I must seek this power. So let's look at the promise of God consciousness, the awareness of God. We can only clear the ground a bit. So just a bit. If our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, that means old ideas, enables you to think honestly. Now, remember I said honesty is knowing where you're at. Encourage you to search diligently. That means diligently means thorough within yourself. How do we do that? 4 through 9. Then if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. That's living in 10, 11, 12. With this attitude, and the attitude is the willingness to look honestly within. With this attitude, you cannot fail, never fail. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. The awareness of God is sure to come to you. So because of the action of 410, our belief becomes reality of God, consciousness, knowing. I start to experience God. One of my favorite writers is Thomas Merton. And he said, when we enter this region, which we had never suspected, the old world of our senses is now one that seems strange, remote, and unbelievable, while the new world seems obvious and familiar. So the old world it was an illusion out here, what we're supposed to have. The new world is familiar because we've always had it, because it's within us. I mean, I know, that being built an image and likeness of my creator, so to speak, is not, this bag of dust I call a body. It must be the life that's in me. And you think, what is life? I mean, you look in the dictionary, it'll say probably earthly existence to death, birth to death or something. But the one that I heard years ago was a spiritual form of eternal existence that transcends physical death. You can't kill life. The Sacramento River right over here where I live is, it's flowed thousands of years. It's the same, it's the same where it flows through there today, the same it went through there yesterday. The life of the river never ends. This goes. I mean, people ask me all the time. Someone said the other day, is there life after death? Do you think, those questions we talk about? I like to ask people, is there life before death? Life was within us. I needed a new attitude, a new relationship with my creator. I needed to get away from the idea of God that I was conditioned as a child. The steps took me to that journey. Remember when I said my conception of God was punishing and all that stuff, right? Guess what happened to me when I did my 5th step? I discovered I was punishing, I was angry, I was unloving, I was judging, I was critical, I was humorless, I was demanding, I was hard to find. I was always trying to fix things outside myself. I didn't listen. The God I resented, I feared was elements of me. The idea of God that I always was the characteristics of me. It wasn't God that, it wasn't God that made me run away from divine help. It's 12 steps. It was me. I built this image and likeness of, in myself. And I looked for an unlimited power and gave it these characteristics that, this false idea was only in my mind. And remember when my sponsor mentioned to me, he's always planting seeds, a seed planter. He says, what do you look for in a friend? And I'd mentioned all that stuff, right? Guess what happened when I started doing step 10? I started to love others, no matter what they did. I looked for the good in other people. I had unconditional love, courage, forgiveness, calmness, and selfless open-mindedness, honesty, freedom. I became, and like all of us, what we're encoded to be. It's the caterpillar to the butterfly, so to speak. But what I'm saying is, this God was real. I could talk to, always there, love me no matter what I've ever did. God is the Father, and we are the children. We're all one. So God, I discovered as a result of this action. I look for, going to the same aspect again. I look for it in drugs. I look for it in women. I look for it in money, sex. I look for it in friends. In terms of the last place I ever looked, I've been carrying around forever. That's why alcoholism is the only key where the prison's inside. It's the only key. It's the only prison where the key's inside, I'm going to say. It's the only prison where the key's inside. Dad realized that, you know, if God is just not the center of my life, something else always is. Resentment or fear. We have a special retreat place where we can go to anytime we want. How to live life effortlessly, where we discover and know inner peace, where we discover, we can go make an amends and be right back where we were. This is just such a beautiful program. And we have all this ultimate beauty. I always tell people, I say, I hate going to San Francisco a lot, not because I don't like the city, is I love the ocean. I've dived before and all that stuff. And people just look at the ocean, think it's ugly. But how do you know it's beautiful? You go inside. And once we learn to enter this beautiful temple, if we have this special retreat place that's always with us, and we can take it wherever we go. So this is one of my favorite things I always bring up. It's the acorn. And some of you have heard me do this before. And I always have to do it. So, this is actually an oak tree. This little acorn is the ultimate symbol of spiritual growth, unlimited potential. It's a symbol of transformation and change because it turns into something totally different than the way it was. It's hard to believe this little acorn can grow into the big, strong oak tree. It doesn't look anything like the image and likeness of its creator. And once this acorn falls from the tree and hits the ground, this mysterious miracle begins to take place. It knows exactly where to turn to get enough sunlight, to get enough water. Germination takes place. Its roots grasp the right soil. That tells me within this little acorn is all the information it needs to survive. And it turns into what's encoded to be the image and likeness of its creator. Are we any different than this little acorn? We too have all the information we need to survive. So the symbol of acorn is just the miracle that's within deep inside everything that lives. That's why when I see an acorn, I say it's an oak tree. The oak tree is within the acorn, just like God within you. So when I see you, I see God. So what the acorn is the oak tree, God is to you. So we too can transcend the image and likeness of our creator. A silly aspect of this is like, hypothetically, if an apple pie could talk and you ask an apple pie where they came from, they're not going to tell you pineapple. They're going to say it came from apples. We understand that, right? That's common sense, right? But when you ask people what they think they came from, they go right back to the package of bones and skin and organs and brains and stuff. We don't understand that we must also be like what we came from. That we're all pieces of God. So we came from this divine source. So we're all infinite, unlimited, a love that excludes no one. So when the thing about it, I tell this to everybody, when you understand what you really are, you will know you are not a human being having a spiritual experience. You are a spiritual being, working on having a human experience. We are the essence and greatness. So we must be what we came from. You know, I mean, this within your inner core, we find this precious gift that, you know, we were born with that's closer to your own breath. That's what we must remember. We call it what we want. Call it God, call it spirit. Just don't call it the doorknob. You know, but it leads to many things: tranquility, peace of mind, harmony, faith, you know, and throughout the ages, and I've studied spirituality deep, and I love all spiritual concepts. And, you know, the yogis and the mystics, the prophets, the philosophers, the greatest teachers, you know, every spiritual tradition has taught me that, has taught us that life's ultimate truth is within us. Like the Buddhists say, my thoughts are within, are always, I'm sorry, my thoughts are always in the truth, for within myself is the truth. And then, like Jesus said, if those who lead you say, look for the kingdom in the sky, then the birds will get there first. If they say it's in the ocean, the fish get there first. The kingdom of God is within you. But like Lao Tzu's from the Tao said, the light is in you. And Shiva seek the senses, and the light will be within. You know, I found out, I've been studying Native Americans, and I'm partly Native American, I found out. And they proclaim the center of real peace is within. It's what Bill Wilson meant when he said we found the great reality deep down within us. It's a treasure of life. You know, I mean, you can call it any, like I said, many names. I mean, Hindus call it Atman, Buddhists call it the Buddha mind, or the Tao. I mean, the Nirvana, or, you know, the Tao is called, it's the Tao. Christianity is called Kingdom of Heaven or Holy Spirit. You know, Quakers call it the voice within. It's always been there. You know, the Plato called it the good and the beautiful. You know, Aristotle called it just being. Carl Jung called it infinite. It was Oversoul was Ralph Waldo Emerson. I think it's what Shakespeare meant when he says, "This above all, thy own self be true." So the names are different. The inner reality is all the same. That's why it's, you know, this inner transitional reality is waiting to be experienced. You know, we enter a region which we've never even suspected, and it manifests in right before our eyes. We get to witness it, watch someone else awaken it. You know, you realize the same light that's burning, it's been burning in you is now burning in them. It's infinite possibilities. You know, to harbor this truth, first we must locate it, then we must seek it, and then you seek what you seek, you shall find. It's the most, you know, journey of your life. I'm going to close with this little saying here. When I close my eyes, I see it. When I silence my mind, I hear it. When I still my body, I know it. And my friend Derek used to say, the eyes which I see God is the same which God sees me. My eyes and God's eyes are one. So, you know, he who knows whom himself knows God. You know, I mean, it's beyond all these layers of ego, you'll find what you're looking for. I'm going to close with, well, I got a couple more things I want to say. I'm thinking my channel, my friend Derek, because he taught me all this stuff, and he was a huge influence on me. He said, everything I thought was something turned out to be nothing, but the nothing I was left with turned out to be everything. You know, the, I read this in years ago in A Course in Miracles. Life happened to me. I'm the victim. It's all your fault. Through seeking, I discovered life happens within me. Today, life happens from me, through me. I'm a channel, you know, sponsoring. So what happens out here no longer has the power to affect me because I have inner strength to handle it. You know, we'll continue this journey, and we agnostics will do more line by line stuff. I know I went off on it's a great. It's my favorite thing to talk about. Probably go on until the cows come home, but we won't do that. Or the rooster crows for kicking. Anyways, I'll stop there.